Let me show an simple example about stock swap transaction in merger case. Given the following data about the share price and the number of shares outstanding for the bidder and the target companies. The bidder or the acquiring company has 30 million shares outstanding. Each share is traded at 20 Egyptian pounds, while the target company has 10 million shares outstanding, and each share is currently traded at also 20 Egyptian pounds. Now the bidder wants to acquire all the outstanding shares of the target company. So the investment bank will calculate the value of the target company at 200 million Egyptian pounds. How the investment bank calculated this value? Simply, the number of shares of the target company is 10 million shares. Each share is traded at 20. So the value of the target company will be 20 times 10 million equals 200 million Egyptian pounds. The issue now is how to pay the 200 million Egyptian pounds. The investment bank can advise the bidder or the acquiring company to use stock swap. How? The stock swap implies that the bidder will issue new shares, and the shareholders of the target company will swap their shares, that is 10 million shares, for the new shares issued by the bidder company. So how many shares the bidder company will issue to swap for 10 million shares? So the investment bank will calculate what is called ratio of exchange or exchange ratio, in which the current price of target company will be divided by the current price of the bidder. So in our case, both the bidder and the target has the same current market price. So 20 over 20 equals 1. This means that the bidder company will issue 1 share for each share of the target. In other words, the shareholders of the target company will give up their shares for the same number of shares issued by the bidder company or the acquiring company. So how many shares the bidder will issue to acquire 10 million shares or to exchange for 10 million shares? It will be 10 million shares. Why? Because the exchange ratio is 1 times. So the price of the target is equal the price of the bidder. Recall that the price per share for the bidder is 20, and target shares are traded at the same price at 20 Egyptian pounds, and the number of shares is 30 million for the bidder and 10 million for the target. So the investment bank will calculate the exchange ratio by multiply the current share price of the target divided by the current share price of the bidder. So it will be 1. And as we said before, 1 means that the bidder will issue 1 new share for swap this share against 1 share in the target company. So the bidder will issue how many shares? We can calculate the number of shares. New shares will be issued by multiplying exchange ratio times number of shares of the target. Exchange ratio is 1, and the number of target shares is 10 million. So 1 times 10 million shares equals 10 million shares. So the number of new shares issued by the bidder will be 10 million shares to swap them against the 10 million shares outstanding of the target company. Okay, so And as a result of this transaction, the total number of outstanding shares of the bidder company will be 40 million shares. How? It previously has 30 million shares, and it issued more 10 million shares to swap against the 10 million shares of the target company. So the total shares outstanding of the bidder company will be 40 million shares. Okay, so if the investment bank require 1% of the transaction value as success fee or success commission, this means that the investment bank wants to receive 1% of the target value, target company value, which is estimated to be 200 million Egyptian pounds. So the investment bank will receive 0.01 times 200 million Egyptian pounds. So the investment bank will receive 2 million Egyptian pounds as a success fee. Let me give a simple case study about merger analysis. Given the following data about two companies which want to merge, the bidder company has 5 million shares. Each share is currently traded at 35 Egyptian pounds, and it expects to get net income of 10 million Egyptian pounds at the end of the current year, and expect this amount to grow at 7% for the next 4 years. Information regarding the target company: it has 3.5 million shares outstanding, and each year is currently traded at 23 Egyptian pounds, and it expects to get net income at the end of the current year of 4.8 million Egyptian pounds, which may to grow at 14% for the next over the next 4 years. The bidder and the target company agree to merge using a stock swap. So the bidder company will issue new shares to exchange for the outstanding 3.5 million shares of the target company. So the new issue in this case is that the target company shareholders are required or negotiate to exchange their shares. How many shares? 3.5 million shares at 25 Egyptian pounds, not at 23. Then the bidder or the acquiring company asks its investment bank to examine the effect of this merge at the 25 Egyptian pounds on its earning per share over the next 5 years. So the investment bank should calculate the exchange ratio at which the bidder will issue new shares to exchange for 3.5 million shares, and the investment bank also will determine how many shares the bidder will issue, to compare the earning per share before merger and after the merger over the next 5 years. Recall the given data about price per share and the number of shares outstanding for both the bidder and the target companies. Price per share of the target company is 35 Egyptian pounds per share, and the bidder has 5 million shares outstanding, while the target company has 3.5 million shares that are currently traded at 23 Egyptian pounds per share. But the shareholders of the target company requires or negotiate to swap their shares at 25 Egyptian pounds, not at 23. So if the investment bank calculates the exchange ratio by dividing 23, which is the market price of the target, over the market price of the bidder at 35. This is will be called theoretical exchange ratio. By dividing 23 over 35 to get 0.66. But the shareholders of the target company requires 25 per share, not to accept 23 per share. So there will be another exchange ratio called negotiated exchange ratio, at which the investment bank will divide the negotiated price for each share of the target company divided by the market price of the bidder shares. So the investment bank will divide 25, which is the negotiated price, over 35, which is the market share price of the bidder, to get 0.7114. So the bidder will issue new shares at the negotiated exchange ratio, not at the theoretical exchange ratio. So the bidder will issue how many shares? We will multiply exchange ratio, negotiated exchange ratio, times number of shares of the target company. So negotiated exchange ratio is 0.714 times number of shares of the target is 3.5 million. So the bidder will issue 2.5 million shares, 2.5 in new shares, 2.5 million in new shares. So as a result of this transaction, the shares outstanding of the bidder will be 7.5 million shares. Why? Because it previously has 5 million shares and issue more 2.5 million shares. So the outstanding shares will be 7.5 million shares.
Because the information about the net income expected to be achieved at the end of current year for the bidder company is 10 million Egyptian pounds, while it expected to be 4 million Egyptian pounds for the target company, and these earnings are expected to grow at 7% for the bidder, and these earnings are expected to grow at 14% over the next 4 years for the target company. So the bidder required the investment bank to compare the performance of earning per share between two cases, without merger and with merger, over the next 5 years, including the current year. So the investment bank will calculate the earning per share over the 5 years without merger. So earnings of the bidder and the number of shares are the two inputs for calculating earning per share. So, and over the next 5 years, earnings of the bidder is expected to be 10 million at the end of current year, which is 2021. So at the end of 2021, we expect to achieve 10 million Egyptian pounds, and the number of shares is 5 million shares without issuing new shares. So before merger, number of outstanding shares is 5 million shares for the bidder or the acquiring company. This amount of earnings is expected to grow at 7% annually. So at the end of year 2022, the earnings expected to grow at 7% to be 10,700,000 Egyptian pounds, and this amount will grow also at 7% to be at the end of year 2023 to be 11,449,000 Egyptian pounds, and so on. It will grow at 7% to be at the end of 2024 to be 12,250,000, and this amount will grow at 7% to be 13 million at the end of year 2025. Number of shares are assumed to be constant over the next 4 years at 5 million shares, because this case is without merger. So the company if the company will not intend to issue a new share. So we can calculate earnings per share in this case by dividing earnings by the number of shares. So we will divide 10 million over 5 millions to be 2 Egyptian pounds per share. So earning per share at the end of current year will be 2 Egyptian pounds per share. After 2 years, it's expected to increase to 2.14 Egyptian pounds per share. At the end of year 2023, it's expected to grow to be 2.29, and so on till year 2025 to be earning per share expected to be 2.62 Egyptian pounds per share. So we expect earning per share to increase because the earnings of this company will increase at 7% and the number of shares is constant. But if the company conducted the merger with the target company, the earnings of the target will be included to the will be accumulated with the earnings of the bidder. So the earnings of the target company is expected to be at the end of the current year to be 4.8 million Egyptian pounds, and this amount will grow at greater growth rate, which is 14%. So this amount will grow at 14% to be at the end of year 2022 to be 5.4 million Egyptian pounds. This amount will grow at 14% to be 6.2 million Egyptian pounds at the end of year 2023. This amount will grow to at 14% to be 7.11 million Egyptian pounds at the end of year 2024. This amount will grow to 8.1 million Egyptian pounds. This means it increased by 14% at the end of year 2025. So according to the merger transaction, the amount of earnings of the target company will combine it with the amount of earnings of the bidder before merger. So total earnings for the overall company, the two companies after merger will be their earnings will be combined. So we will add earnings of the bidder to the earnings of the target to be 14 million or 14.8 million Egyptian pounds, and at the end of year 2022 we will add 10.7 plus 5.4 to be 16.1 million Egyptian pounds, and so on at till year 2025. We expect earnings of the new company or the bidder after conducted the merger transaction to be 21.2 million Egyptian pounds, and we will divide this amount by the number of shares. But the number of shares will not be the same as at 5 million shares, because to conduct this the merger transaction, the bidder issue new shares to exchange for the outstanding shares of the target. So the number of shares of the bidder become 7.5 million shares. So we will divide the total earnings after merger transactions over the total number of shares after merger transactions, which is 7.5 million shares. So we will put the number of shares to calculate the earning per share. So earning per share at the end of the current year will be 1.97. After 2 years will be 2.16, and will 2.36, 2.58, and 2.83. 2.83, we obtain this value by dividing total earnings over 7.5 million shares. So if we conduct this analysis, the investment bank will tell the bidder at the end of the current year earning per share without merger is greater than with merger. But this is the initial effect of merger. The initial effect of merger, a short-run effect. The merger will result in a little bit decrease in the earning per share. But after the first year, the earning per share with merger or after merger will be greater than the earning per share without merger. So in the long run, the merger will result in greater earning per share for the shareholders of the bidder. So merger will be favorable to the shareholders of the bidder. Okay, if the investment bank require 1% of transaction value as success commission, so recall that the value of target company will be obtained by multiplying number of shares outstanding of the target company times negotiated price, because the shareholders of the target requires a merger premium of 2 Egyptian pounds above the market price of 23, so the negotiated price is 25. So the value of target company will be obtained by multiplying number of outstanding shares, which is 3.5 million shares, times negotiated price at 25 Egyptian pounds. So the value of target company, or the transaction value, will be 87.5 million Egyptian pounds, and the investment bank will receive 1% of this amount. So the investment bank will receive 875,000 Egyptian pounds as a success commission. Thank you.